Some sewing techniques go in and out of fashion, but as long as there are little girls, there will be ruffles. Learning how to make evenly gathered ruffles takes a little inside know-how. However, it is easy. For the little boys' clothes, we will spend some time perfecting tailored piping skills. Inspiration, a practical, quick, and easy project, and machine embroidery tips all are in fashion here today. On with the show and welcome to my sewing room. I love baby day gowns, and I love special details on baby day gowns. Well, actually on everything. This little gown has so many details. The beautiful little ruffle that comes around the neckline has the silk dupioni baby gingham and the band of linen and then lace, and it comes all the way around. But let's don't go down to the bottom yet. Do you see each one of the seams has this beautiful piping done in the silk dupioni gingham? I cannot not show you these sleeves. Okay, the little sleeve has a tie, and when the little sleeve is untied, it reveals a beautiful little peekaboo of the gingham silk dupioni. Coming on down the front, these beautiful little pearl buttons and more of that wonderful ruffle. Now, before we go all the way down, I'm going to turn over here again. Isn't that adorable? We have an inset of the gingham silk dupioni again. Coming on down the side, this is the perfect place on baby clothes to do your beautiful machine embroidery designs, and once again the ruffle that comes all the way around. Now the ruffle is very important, and gathering it correctly as well as easily is very important. The ruffle has the silk gingham, and then the little band of the linen, and then a tiny little bit of baby lace, baby French lace. Now over here, we've used a ruffler to gather this perfectly, so that becomes this beautiful ruffle that goes all the way around this little day gown. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today my dear friend and business colleague, Shirley Schooley. Shirley is a creative consultant for FOF USA. Shirley, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha.
And this beautiful day gown, I just love it.
And these easy ruffles.
Yeah, easy and perfection are the two words we like.
At the same time.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, one of the nice things about technology is that we have some ways to do things that are much easier than what perhaps we've been doing them in the past. The ruffler's been around for a long time, and almost any machine manufacturer probably provides that for you as an extra accessory. I have one here on the board, and you can see it's kind of a funny looking contraption until you really observe it. In order to attach it to your machine, you take the ankle off of the machine, and using a screw, a screwdriver or thumb screw, you attach that to the machine. The ruffler actually makes a little pleat, and what you get is a ruffled effect. And you can alter the depth of the pleat and the frequency of the pleats or the frequency of the gathers by changing the stitch length, by changing the frequency with which the ruffler makes a pleat, or changing the number of pleats for every however many stitches the ruffler will make a stitch. So if you look at my sample here, I started out, this was just a 2.5 stitch length, and I started with it set for making a pleat every 6 stitches. I moved to it making a pleat every single stitch, and I moved to it making a pleat every 12 stitches. Now I would get even more variety in my results if I changed the stitch length. I can also, there's a little screw, a little adjusting screw on all of these that you can change the depth of the pleat. So the amount of fabric that you take up in the ruffle depends on all of those factors that you put together, and so you've got to experiment. And the easiest way to do that is to take a strip of prepared fabric and mark a space on there. I usually use about 10 inches because that's easy to work with. Decide what settings you want to experiment with, pleat that or use that ruffler, and then go with it and keep a record. Now I have the machine here set up for a 2.5 stitch length, and I have it so that it makes a pleat every 6 stitches. And again, I would emphasize we would get different results if we changed any of those factors. And you can see how easy it is. I have just inserted this, and if you will watch the machine, you will actually almost hear that take 6 stitches and then make a little pleat. And what I get is a gathered effect, which you can then make a little more pleat-like or a little more gathers, but it's basically a gathering. I was telling Martha that I did this. I gathered a dust ruffle from my king-size bed 3 or 4 years ago using this, and it took me about 10 minutes to do.
Very good.
That is very, very good. So it is a wonderful accessory and easy to use and not at all forbidding if you just will pay attention to it. One of the things I like to note, if you can see here on this part, I sometimes will use a felt tip type pen to mark where I want the seam allowance to be, and I can mark that on there and take a little rubbing alcohol and get those off and change it again. So sometimes that's a nice guide, particularly when using this very narrow trim.
Shirley, that is just fascinating, and a real quick trip down memory lane. Years and years and years ago, I remember my mother's buying a ruffler. That was her big accessory, and we're talking probably 1950s.
I don't think they've changed much
They're
since
wonderful. Then. Mother loved her ruffler, and thank you so much for showing us how easy it is to use this wonderful tool.
And do all of these yards so easily.
Yeah, and they're even.
That's right.
Shirley, thank you so much. And now Shirley has some sewing inspirations to share with you. Shirley, it looks like you've used that wonderful ruffler on this beautiful bonnet.
I did.
Now, this particular piece of ribbon was used to the ruffler, and I'm going to show our viewers. Let me pull this back. Do you see that tiny little piece now? Is that ribbon, or is that a piece of fabric folded?
That's a piece of silk organza, just folded over and run through the ruffler.
Look at those tiny little ruffles, and then the ribbon, and you just gathered this one, didn't you?
Yes.
Oh, since we're looking at baby things, let's look at this beautiful, beautiful christening blanket that has the machine embroidery and the ribbon, and that's the silk, the Swiss batiste, and then chalet on the back.
Yes.
So nice for winter, baby.
It feels wonderful. I'd like to sleep in it.
Shirley, I love what you did here. Now tell us how you got this little truck.
Well, this is my grandson's quilt, and I had to take it away from him, and he wasn't very happy. But in order to do this,
to bring it to the show,
that's right. I'm not normally a quilter, and in order to get this little pattern, which I used intermittently to quilt, I actually scanned in the fabric and used my sketch program in the software and created that, and then just embroidered over those areas.
And then you quilted the whole area with this pattern that you had scanned in. Shirley, that's wonderful. And I bet your grandson does love that quilt.
He does.
Ruffler again.
Ruffler again for all 3 of those ruffles.
Beautiful pillow, and of course machine embroidery, the little fairies. Ruffler again. And ruffler again?
No, this was my silk embroidery. Sometimes I get away from the machine and I just get something beautiful in my hands, and I love to do silk ribbon embroidery, and so that's my silk ribbon embroidery. I love your color selections. I'm going with the puffing on the side. On the puffing, very traditional.
This beautiful, beautiful dress. Oh my goodness.
This is my, I didn't have time to make an Easter dress. So gorgeous fabric. Some nice, simple to do, quick to do embroidery, some silk ribbon, and I used pearl cotton to make the little belt loops, and I did it in an afternoon.
Well, that is some beautiful Easter dress, and this is so beautiful. The cascading ruffles I especially love on this. Now, this is a pattern, about 1850 kind of pattern, isn't it?
That's right.
A reproduction pattern. And I think you said this is all silk lace?
This is a 100% silk satin. And this beautiful lace, and there's about 25 yards of lace in that dress, but is it beautiful?
And yes, it really is. And that is the traditional 1850s, 1860s.
That's right. It has the drawstring in both the neck and in the waist.
Neckline and the drawstring in the waistline. We see that so many times on my beautiful antiques.
I know, and they
You
fit
did a
so
wonderful
nicely.
reproduction here, Shirley.
Thank you.
And now Shirley has a So Quick, So Easy project to share with you. Shirley, I love your fabric basket.
Thank you, Martha. This is really fun. I call this my Sewing Notions box because I have little sayings about sewing, and those of us who love to sew, but of course you could do it with a little bit different theme if you choose. I did this using my software, and this is a great way to use up some of those sort of scraps from your fabric stash because you only need 2 12-inch squares to start with. So let me just show you quickly. Now you're going to embroider the inside piece and you're going to embroider the outside piece before you do anything else. So this was, in my hoop, I was able to do the all-one design in it, but if you cannot do that, then if you have a smaller hoop, you can split the design. I actually created this with the Encore feature in my software, so you can just do whatever makes your heart sing to get that, so that you're going to embroider so that you have 2 pieces that are about 12 inches square or less, because we want to finish up with or start with a 9-inch piece. You're going to use the stabilizer and keep the stabilizer in there, and that's going to add the stiffening that you need for your box. So you would layer that together, and when you get through, you have both the front piece and the back embroidered piece. Baste those together around the edges, and I have this wonderful little tool. I round the corners so that you don't have to worry about putting the binding around a sharp edge. The other thing you'll want to do before you actually sew this together is clip out the stabilizer at each of the 4 corners, so that if you will look at this box, you can easily form this little shape here. After you have done this, you will take some pieces of ribbon and stitch those about 1.5 inches from each corner, 2 on each corner, about 1.5 inches from the edge. Make some binding for your little box. Sew that binding on, tie up the ribbon, and what you get is this wonderful box. The binding that I used for this particular box, I first put into the hoop using the fabric decorator feature on my software, and I actually added some pattern to this, but you could use any kind of binding that you want. So with your fabric stash, most of you will have what you need to make this right in your sewing room today. So give it a try. These make great places to put things that will scar furniture and so forth. Thanks.
Shirley, oh, I just love that. Thank you so much.
Oh,
I think everybody can do that. And
everybody
that
can do that.
Is calling us.
That's right.
And now I have some designer techniques to share with you. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today my very dear friend and business colleague, Kathy Barnard. Kathy is editor of So Beautiful magazine. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Martha. I'm so glad to be back. Thanks for having me. Today we're going to talk about piping. It's not very exciting, but you might want to ask yourself, well, what more can we learn about it? And that's what the show is all about. We've got some new methods to show you to make it a lot easier and to take all of those kinks and worries out of making piping and applying piping to a garment. First, I'd like to show you we did a good dress, bad dress series designed by Nancy McAvoy. She's the one who developed this technique. And I want to show you the bad dress first so you can see some common errors that you'll relate to. Let me show you. On the collar of this dress, this is our bad dress too, mind you. You'll see that the piping is very thick and thin. It's not very even. There's some really sharp points here, and some of our basting stitching is showing through. Over on the sleeve area, let me show you where, when the piping was stitched into the seam, the basting stitching is showing. And that happens when you don't have a good, tight, close stitch to your cording. Over on the waistband, we're going to come over here and show you where the piping got swallowed up by the machine right here. And I can really relate to this, Martha, and anyone who's done piping for the first time will have this problem. This is very easy to do, especially when you're working with the thickness of gathering right here. So I'd like to show you what piping should look like and how this method can make all of those hair pulling things go away. On this dress, you'll see that the piping will start here at the collar where we started before. The piping is very even around the collar, and you don't see any of the stitching where none of the basting stitching is showing on this. It's very even and very precise. Same on this edge. It's very even and precise and very closely, snugly sewn next to the cord. On the waistband, we don't have any of that problem where the seam swallowed up the cording. So it makes a really beautiful trim when it's done the right way. First, one of the common mistakes people make is in the cutting stage. Most people want to cut their piping to the same width as their seam allowance. Let's say their seam allowance is 1/2 inch, so they cut the piping 1 inch without regard to how much space that cord is actually going to take up. And another thing that happens, Martha, is that when you're sewing, the bias can stretch and make thick and thin spots, so you don't get a true seam allowance from stitch to raw edge. The easiest thing to do is to not worry too much at all with the calculations. Just cut a really fat piece of bias, fold it in half, create your piping, and then you'll trim this area to whatever seam allowance you want. And that's particularly helpful when you have a dress that has different seam allowances, like in the waistband seam there might be a half inch seam allowance, and in the collar there's 1/4 of an inch, so you just cut it to fit. Second, you want to create your piping tape, is what I call it. You'll fold your bias in half and put your cord in the crease, but the trick here, the common mistake people make, is they use a zipper foot, and when you use the zipper foot it can work, but you've got to do a lot of the guiding yourself. If you use a 7-groove pin tuck foot, you have all of these grooves that catch the cording. I use the center groove, and as you can see, it just guides completely through that center, and you don't even have to do much work to it. The second common mistake is people don't use their needle position. When you have a sewing machine that has multiple needle positions, the first thing you want to do is place this under the machine, put your cord in the center groove, place the needle right to the point that is the most snug against that cord, and then back off 2 clicks away from that, and you're going to have maybe 1 stitch to 2 stitch lengths away from your final stitching. So the first run, you'll set that in the center groove and stitch out to the side a little bit away from your final stitching. Next, once all of your piping tape is complete, you'll want to use this really handy ruler that has a groove in it, and when you place the cord in the groove, it catches it, and you can just cut that easily along the side, either with a rotary cutter or mark it and cut it with scissors. Next, a common mistake people make is when they don't necessarily take the time to baste the piece onto the garment fabric. They want to just fold it into 2 pieces of fabric and stitch it all together, but that causes a lot of shifting.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so what you want to do is place it back under the foot, put that cord in the center groove, stitch again in the same needle position, place your next layer over it. But now most people want to stitch from this side, and Martha, as you can see, if you stitch from this side you can get a lot of shifting because this fabric is laying over a hump. If you'll actually turn that over, you'll see that you've already created a stitching guideline right here, and this fabric won't shift, and it leaves the other fabric flat, not maneuvering over a hump. You'll place that in the machine with your cord in the center groove, and then move that needle position back over right next to that the cord, and it will automatically grab the cord underneath the fabric and stitch it snugly against there, and when you open it, you haven't shown
Perfect
any of your
piping.
basting stitching. So it makes perfect piping. You can also finish the edges with a zigzag. And here we have it with a gathered stitch. Again, the key here is to keep the gathering underneath and bring this up on top, and sew your piping from the top side, and you will never, with this grooved foot, you'll never accidentally sew over the cord.
Oh,
so.
Kathy, that was absolutely fascinating.
Yes,
and
it's never
and
a
the
problem.
sample you showed us is perfect piping, and
Yes.
anybody that goes to that trouble wants it to look perfect.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And now we have some machine embroidery ideas to share with you. I am so happy to have as my guest today Denise Applegate-Schober. Denise is Aftermarket Sales Manager of VSM Sewing. Denise, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Martha. I'm so excited to show you big designs for large hoops.
Oh, let me hold this beautiful jacket up. Tell us about it.
This is a collection that is smaller designs, and I've put them together in the software for my machine and made it to fit a larger hoop. So now it's quite large, it's huge.
Oh, it's beautiful. And this beautiful chocolate brown and robin's egg blue. Tell us about that.
Same thing here. The centerpiece was one design, and then I've taken these pieces and I've encored them in a circle along with these leaves to create a larger design, and did it in one hooping.
Oh, Denise, show us all about this.
So I've got
new
some
excitement.
Yes, I've got some tips. You'll need a larger stabilizer and either bobbins that are pre-wound or bobbins that you're going to wind, and then some embroidery thread. And what we're going to do is show you two different large hoops. This is an extremely large hoop that you'll turn the hoop to do your second side, where this large hoop you have here, you're going to actually hoop in one hooping. And I have clips here that you see. If the fabric is a lightweight, what you're going to do is you're going to clip, like I've done at the machine here, clip your fabric in place, and that way it prevents shifting. Also, you'll want to have the right stabilizer. So this stabilizer here, it irons away. The one I'm using with the jacket there, it tears away. Again, another design that was done in this hoop with a very lightweight fabric. And again, the clips were used, as you see here. So we've got a design here. It's in the machine. And basically what's going to happen is we begin to sew. So I'm just going to sew a little bit. The hoop will move normal. Well, when we're done, it'll prompt us to stop. We'll remove the hoop, take it off the machine, and on the other side of the machine here is the same type of setup where we'll place it back on the machine arm and begin embroidering again. That's how you create those large hoop designs.
Okay, so these were really small hoop things, smaller designs.
Yes, so like this
and
design
your
here.
software,
And this,
you fixed it
add them
any
together.
size you want to. As
Yes.
long, and this huge, wonderful hoop, it almost looks like you put that over your head and slip it down your body.
Some people could. I don't know if I'd try it, but some
I
people
could. But then you created this and sewed this thing all at one time, but without rehooping.
Without rehooping.
Denise, did you use like on this denim jacket? What kind of stabilizer and how much? Just one sheet?
It's two sheets. You can understabilize faster than what you can overstabilize. So
Okay.
I always suggest two sheets. It's a tear away because the denim has some substance to it. It has some thickness to it, but it's better with two sheets.
Okay, so that's kind of what you do on a heavy fabric, and then on that lighter weight, such as the wool challis on that shawl, did you use a top stabilizer also?
I did use a topper. It was an
Okay.
iron away.
An iron away topper, in addition to the two rows on the bottom.
Right.
Denise, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Martha.
And next, I'd like to share a piece from my vintage collection with you. This is one of my all-time favorite pieces in my collection. A little high yoke bodice dress with tucks and insertion, Swiss insertion with entredot. Very simple little long sleeve. It is the skirt, which is so fabulous on this dress. I'm going to hold this out so you can see this beautiful, beautiful skirt with the Swiss embroidery that is mitered, then this beautiful piece of wide French lace, Swiss embroidery that is mitered into points, high points and low points, and mitered down, and then this absolutely gorgeous French edging. And if you will look underneath, there's another piece which has some of the Swiss edging on a little under petticoat, if you will. The back of the dress is equally as beautiful as the front. As a matter of fact, it's just like it. It's closed with two buttons and buttonholes. And let me just hold that out again so you can look at that unbelievably beautiful treatment on the bottom of this dress. As a matter of fact, my daughter Joanna, the first French dress that she copied of my antique collection, she copied this dress. I have a letter here from Pam from Florida. Dear Martha, my mother went to be with the Lord 4 years ago. She spent 5 days at Hope Hospice in Cape Coral, Florida. The staff was the most caring, compassionate group I have ever seen. They not only cared for Mom, but also Dad, my sister, and me as well. Every year since, while in Florida, I've made lap quilts for them to give to the current residents. They are always so appreciative and it is such a blessing for me to be able to get back to such a wonderful ministry. Gratefully, Pam. And Pam says you don't need to mention my name, but Pam, it's just wonderful when you viewers and my friends write to me to tell me about the sewing for others that you do. Thank you for writing, Pam. And now I want to thank you for coming today, and I would certainly like to invite you to join me next time.